The US stock market is overcast after a series of successful sessions. The benchmark stock indexes reached 15-month highs in the light of disinflation signs and upbeat reports of the top American banks. Now, market sentiment has turned sour in a response to reports from high-tech giants. Apart from corporate earnings, investors are digesting a weekly update by the US Labor Department, which proves the health of the labor market. And the major stock indexes had another successful day on Wednesday. All of them closed with gains, and the Dow Jones was the best performer. The Dow Jones climbed by 109 points, or 0.31%. It closed with gains for 8 sessions straight. That is the longest winning streak since September 2019. The Nasdaq and the S&P500 looked modest performance and closed 0.03 and 0.24% up, respectively. The S&P 500 grew to 4,565 points. The benchmark stock indexes traded mixed in the New York pre-market. Futures on the Dow Jones extended the uptrend and edged up by 0.12%. The Nasdaq and the S&P went down and shed 0.16 and 0.6% respectively. The S&P is expected to trade in the intraday corridor between 4,510 and 4,580 points. Shares of the high-tech giants capped growth of the stock indexes on Wednesday. The Nasdaq suffered the most. At the same time, bank shares continued their rally. The bank sub-index of the S&P rose by 1.7%. The catalyst for such growth was a quarterly report by Goldman Sachs. Shares of Goldman Sachs gained 0.97% despite the report of a 3-year low profit. The shares received a boost from a comment by CEO David Solomon, who voiced optimism about the recovery of investment banking. Growing optimism in the sector and the solid performance of regional banks lifted other stocks in the segment as well, with the regional banking index up 2.9%. The dynamic of the high-tech sector was the opposite. The Nasdaq's growth was subdued by a decline of Microsoft shares by 1.23%, as Apple said it was developing new artificial intelligence products. Nvidia shares lost 0.88% and Alphabet shares fell by 1.4%. Tesla shares rose by 0.46% after the electric car maker reported a decline in the second quarter gross profit from the previous 3 months. But optimism about the electric car maker's performance was short-lived. At the pre-market today, Tesla shares were selling fast, putting pressure on the S&P 500 and Nasdaq. Although electric vehicle giant Tesla comfortably beat earnings forecast in the second quarter, markets welcomed the plans. Elon Musk signaled on Wednesday that he would cut the price of electric vehicles again, even though his huge discounts hurt the company's bottom line. Shares of the electric car maker fell by 4.24% before the opening bell on the announcement, despite outperforming quarterly earnings estimates. Likewise, even though Netflix net income beat Wall Street estimates and it added nearly 6 million new subscribers, its stock tumbled by 6.18% before the opening bell because quarterly revenue growth and the guidance were sluggish. Shares in software provider IBM dropped by 1% after second quarter revenue fell short of Wall Street consensus. According to Refinitiv data, 10% of S&P companies have already submitted reports. 80% of them exceeded forecasts. Returning to macroeconomic statistics, the data on the labor market once again reflected its stability. The number of Americans who applied for unemployment benefits last week fell by 9,000 to 228,000, the lowest figure in the last 2 months and sharply below market expectations of 242,000. Despite historically low numbers, jobless claims rose to 1,754,000 in the previous week, the sharpest increase in the 3 months. In addition to the labor market data, only home sales will be released after the opening of the stock exchanges. Corporate reports will be dominated by pharmaceuticals and finance, for example, Johnson & Johnson. The US dollar is gradually regaining its footing, having grown by 0.18%. Its index traded at 100.46 points. Its intraday Canada is determined between 99 and 90 and 101 and 50 points. The greenback recovered the most today against the pound sterling, and the British pound has stumbled by 2.3% this week, as the CPI release yesterday showed that inflation in the UK is notably last month, and today the sterling shed 0.5% against the US dollar. The greenback also rebounded against the euro but weakened considerably against the Australian dollar. All in all, the US dollar index remains not far away from the highest level in 15 months. Now investors are revising bets on further policy decisions of major central banks, bearing in mind the disinflationary dynamic provided by the statistics for Canada, the UK and the United States, alongside mixed signals from the ECB speakers. In this context, most currencies will hardly make sharp price moves until next week. The Canadian dollar is a certain strength against its American rival, and the USD CAD pay is now trading at 1.3148, 0.12% lower. It's likely to trade in the intraday Canada between 1.3110 and 1.3180. Oil prices rose on Thursday, supporting the commodity-reliant loonie. Futures for Brent crude rose by 0.6% to $79.96 a barrel, and WTI grew by 0.3%. The Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries and the International Energy Agency foresee robust demand from China in the second half of this year that will remain the main driver of a global economic growth. Oil prices may struggle to find a clear direction. The mixed outlook for global demand wanes on optimism for production cuts, which creates uncertain market sentiment. The crypto market is still trading cautiously and mixed. Having climbed by 1%, Bitcoin is trading today at 30,200. Popular altcoins are trading mixed. Ethereum, Solana, Ripple, Cardano, Binance and Litecoin are wavering between a fall of 2.2% and a gain of 1.9%. It's quite difficult for the crypto market to grow given the confrontation with the regulators. The information background is flooded with such news. Several policymakers of the US House of Representatives signed a letter to Gary Gensler. The letter reads that the auctions of the Securities and Exchange Commission were undermining lawmakers' efforts to write comprehensive legislation. While Congress is working to close regulatory gaps, the Commission is enforcing regulation. Gensler himself does not give up and asks the US Congress to allocate more than $2.4 billion for a crusade against the wild market. The committee vote and discussion of the proposed US cryptocurrency bill is now scheduled for July 26, and the intrigue is holding. The intraday outlook for Bitcoin has not changed. Bitcoin never broke the $30,400 high. If the token does not gain momentum, it can spend the day in a flat movement between $29,800 and $30,200. Going beyond these borders will enable the price to retest the levels of $29,600 and $30,400 and the levels of $29,000 and $31,000 later. Thank you for watching. We closely monitor the markets and provide you with the up-to-date financial information and analysis. We are waiting for your questions and comments. Subscribe to our channel and see you online tomorrow.